I never minded being deaf, and in fact, I preferred it as I got older. I know that I was expected to feel lonely, even isolated, but I loved the silence. It allowed me to move through life without distraction. I only had to turn on Fox News to be glad and reminded that my genetic predisposition was saving me from a massive headache of all the unnecessary noise in the world. My parents, on the other hand, saw my disability as some sort of personal slight to them, as if God was sticking out a thick middle finger when I was born. Barbara and Louis Cascade, with their perfect upper-middle-class existence, were not supposed to have a deaf daughter. I was exactly how they wanted me to look, with my corn-silk blonde hair, porcelain skin, and bright blue eyes. But to them, I was like a beautiful piece of pottery with a large, unsightly crack down the middle. Useless. They tried everything. Surgeries, naturopathic doctors, acupuncture, anything that might fix me. And when nothing did, they conceded. There was always that lingering feeling of disappointing them. Even though I excelled at school, had a great job, and married a dream of a husband named Teddy. I think that is why I agreed to have the surgery. I wanted to finally make them happy. Give them the daughter they always wanted. A perfect daughter that could hear. It was a restorative, experimental procedure that was to be performed by a renowned otolaryngologist near my hometown, on the outskirts of Seattle. The doctor was very clear. There was a high probability of failure, and that he was still working on the nuances of the operation. At my parents' insistence and pocketbook, he agreed to take me on as a patient, clearing his schedule. It all happened so fast that Teddy was unable to get off work, so I was forced to fly out of Boston by myself, greeting my hopeful but anxious parents in Seattle. We went to the hospital where Dr. Hubbard dumbed down the surgery to the most pedestrian of terms. I nodded along, not really taking in anything he was saying. The night before the operation, I laid on my old bed, FaceTiming Teddy. I had become acutely skilled at reading lips over the years. "I love you too," I said, signing with my hands, before turning off the lights and drifting to sleep. I was given anesthesia, and when I woke up from the surgery, a nurse was there to help me, calling my parents and the doctor to let them know I was conscious. "How are you feeling, Callie?" said Dr. Hubbard, stroking his white beard. He reminded me of a slimmed-down version of the KFC Colonel Sanders. "I'm okay. There's some pain in my..." I stopped, and Dr. Hubbard gave me an amused smile. "I can hear my voice," I stammered. "Oh my God." My mom began crying as her and my dad wrapped their arms around me, brimming with joy. "Thank you, Dr. Hubbard. Thank you," Mom said in tears. She sounded like I expected her to, high-pitched and jarring. My dad's voice, on the other hand, was low and smooth, pleasant. We went back to my parents' house, and I called Teddy to let him know that my surgery was, as far as I could tell, a success. "That's amazing," he said, and I was so glad to find his voice melodic. "I'm swamped at work, but I'll try to get out there as soon as I can. Promise." When my parents and I sat down for dinner, I could still feel a bit of pressure in my ears, but overall felt normal. I was talking excitedly about some of my new favorite sounds when I heard something. It was like my mother's voice, except in the faintest of whispers. It's a shame she still has the same voice. "What?" I said, and both my parents looked at me. "Did you just say something about my voice?" My mom's face turned ashen. "No, dear, nobody said anything about your voice." She gripped her glass of Chardonnay, taking a long sip. I turned my attention towards her and could hear something else. It was a sound that I would later identify as a squeaky wheel, a low ambient noise, almost undetectable. There was something else too, a hushed but warm hum. Bum 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 a bum bum bum. Mashed potatoes. I looked over to my dad, who was heaping another spoonful of potatoes on his plate. I caught his glance and he gave me a small wave. Over the next few days, I came to discover it wasn't just my parents that I could hear, but everyone. That each person carried with them their own individual and unique sound. Most of the time, just a background noise that was so faint, I could barely hear it. I would occasionally come across a thought in words, but for the most part, it was just an audible sensation. I spent my days on YouTube listening to as many sounds as I could, so that I could identify the noises that I heard from the people around me. Miss Tucker, a pleasant woman across the street who was a wonderful cook, had a noise that I could best describe like teeth being sunk into fried chicken. The mailman's sound reminded me of rain falling on stones. Roger, my parents' gardener, sounded like a deck of cards being shuffled. They weren't all pleasant sounds, though. I ran into an old English teacher of mine from school, Mr. McGrath, a surly man who sounded like a choir of farts, a mixture of small toots and wet thundering rips. I had to suppress myself from laughing, listening to the ricocheting flatulence as we made small talk. A few people had music as their sound. Not the simple rhythm of my father, but complex, wonderful areas that left me speechless. I was walking down the street and stopped in front of our neighbor, Leah Silverstein's house, an older woman and Holocaust survivor. I could hear her sound even at a distance. A devastating and hauntingly beautiful music that left me standing still, unable to move as tears fell down my face. My favorite sound, though, belonged to children. I'm not sure why it was, but I found that all children had the same sound, unlike adults. It was a mixture of giggles and laughter, hearty and cheerful. If I went by a playground or a school, I could hear the collective noise of joy and happiness, a magnificent orchestra that made my heart swell every time. I was shopping in the downtown area, marveling at my new reality, a life full of sounds. All I had to do was shift my focus to a person and I could hear them. Tugboats, wolf howls, rustling leaves, the sound of milk being poured into Rice Krispies, snap, crackle, pop. Then I heard something, a vociferous boom that rang throughout my head, paralyzing me. It was like nails against a chalkboard. I could hear a word cutting through, clear and awful, repeating. Hurt, hurt, hurt. I held my breath, my mind spinning, as I staggered in the direction the noise was coming from. The closer I became in proximity to it, the more pain I felt, like spikes were being lodged into my temples. Sweat poured down my face, and I felt like I might collapse. I looked up from the ground to find myself standing in front of a dilapidated hotel, the kind that looks like it charges by the hour instead of the day. In front of me was a door marked with the number 3. I called the police, giving them my location, lying and telling them I could hear screaming from inside the room. When they arrived, I stood back, watching as they knocked on the door. An unremarkable older man answered. As he opened the door, I could hear another noise. The soft sound of piano being played, and an undeniable word. Help. "There's someone in there!" I screamed, unable to contain myself. The police officers pushed through, much to the man's protest. From where I was, I could see her. A young girl, bound to the bed, in just her underwear, a plastic bag covering her head. I saw the man arrested, and the girl, whoever she was, rescued. To my relief, as the bag was removed, the music that was so faint increased in volume. I left before the police could ask me any questions. Although I didn't tell anyone, not even Teddy, about my newfound abilities, I made the decision to confide in Dr. Hubbard after the incident at the motel. I sat in his exceptionally clean white office during my check-in and told him everything. He sat back listening, his owl-like eyes studying me intently. "Just curious, what is my sound?" he said. "It's like the crunch of fresh snow underneath boots. It's lovely," I said with a smile. This made him chuckle. "The air is a fascinating thing, and I can only surmise at what you're experiencing, or why for that matter. The procedure is reversible though, Callie. I would be happy to..." He trailed off. I shook my head. No. There's so many wonderful things about it, I couldn't imagine shutting it off now. It was not long afterwards, though, that I thought differently about the sounds. I was in my parents' kitchen making lunch and chatting with their cleaner, Anita, who sounded like coarse hands being rubbed together when it hit me. It was a sound that took my breath away. Children, screaming and crying in pain, as if they were being tortured and maimed. I could hear them yelling in anguish. It was excruciating, the noise penetrating and inescapable. It enveloped me, and I could physically feel the sound, like knives tearing away at my flesh. I began to cry as a wave of nausea crippled me. and I sunk to the floor. In front of me, I saw the front door begin to open. Teddy's beaming smile came into view. "Surprise!" he called into the house. There was a look of concern as he saw me brace on the floor. He came over. "Callie? Are you okay? What's wrong?" I looked at him in horror, the children's cries echoing in my head, even louder now. My beloved Teddy, my husband, and bearer of the worst sound in the world.
Chronicler here. We here at Creepy Spaghet would like to thank GreyBuildings679 for allowing us to tell their story. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on these terrible tales, and make sure to check out the author in the links below. If you're interested in having your story narrated, be sure to reach out to our humble overseer, as he continues his journey to pull the darkest stories from the infinite depths of the internet. Until next time, fiends. And remember, we are darkness.